Normally when you're working with animals, they have a backup animal. There's the wrangler. It's like having a stand-in. Like something happens to the monkey, then you need someone else. At one point, we're about to shoot and Annie's like, where's Frida? And she's referring to the monkey and no one can find Frida the monkey. And Frida the monkey is like under a big truck drinking Coca-Cola and eating gummy bears. And I'm not joking. And I thought, this is probably not right.
This is Going Rogue, and I'm Jill Demling. Today's guest is my dear friend Karen Mulligan, the woman behind the legendary photographer Annie Leibovitz. Karen started as a production assistant at Annie's studio over 25 years ago and worked her way up to become not only Annie's studio manager, but also her agent. Anyone who knows Karen knows she is Oz, making it all happen behind the curtain. It was on our first cover shoot together back in 2002 that we realized we had more in common than just working long hours for two of the most influential women in the industry, and we have been best friends ever since. Let's get to it as Karen Mulligan goes rogue.
Hi, Jill.
Hi, how
Thanks
are
for having
you?
me on the show.
I'm very excited. I mean, I know so much about you, but every time you even tell a story that I've heard many times, I still find myself dying laughing. Let's get to it. Did you grow up being interested in photography? Were you a fan of Annie's work? What got you into this career?
Right. My path was not the traditional one. I studied English literature and art history in undergraduate. So, of course, I was interested in the arts. Not in photography specifically, but in the arts. But I was more interested in books and literature. And after I graduated college, I took a couple years off, worked in publishing as an editorial assistant while I figured out my next step, and then ended up going to NYU for graduate school, studying American and English literature. Thought I was going to be a professor, and that was my path. I finished graduate school. I kind of was mumbling around trying to find a job. I realized that you could have all this education, but it doesn't really help you in the practical world. My dad always said to me, he said, English literature, that's a great major because you'll have really good conversations at cocktail parties. So it was never seen as a career, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
A very good friend of mine, Cara Glynn, was about to take a job with Annie Leibovitz as her studio manager. I was telling her I was looking for a job, and she said, I think that Annie is looking for someone to do research for this book that she is working on called Women. Would you be interested? And I said, yes, of course. That's like an easy thing for me to do. I mean, I've been doing research my whole life. Of course, I knew who Annie Leibovitz was, but didn't really understand the machinations or anything about what a photo studio was. Like, that was just so foreign for me. I was like in classrooms. It wasn't that I even could imagine what that was going to be like. I met her last. And I remember I met with Jim Moffat, her agent at the time, and he basically hired me. And I said, don't you think I should meet Annie? And he said, well, I think you just meet her on the first day. And I thought, well, I think maybe I should meet her beforehand. And he said, well, she's traveling. And I remember specifically, she was in South Africa photographing Hillary Rodham Clinton. I just remember being really nervous all the time and thought I was going to get fired every week. And the first day I started, no one introduced me, and I'm like all of a sudden in the middle of the office and all these people are running around and I don't really know where to go and no one really greets me. So I just go and sit on this couch, and 3 hours later, someone asks me why I'm there. And I was like, this is my first day of work. I think I'm supposed to start. And no one really knew because I think people were getting let go. And so there was a lot of things like that. And Cara, for some reason, wasn't there on that first day. But anyway, there was these big Rolodexes on the desk.
I remember the big Rolodex.
Yes.
I kept mine for a long time.
Exactly.
Actually.
And they're just sitting there and I was like, I guess I have to go through these and understand who these people are, because I didn't know any of the players at the magazine.
Right.
So yes, of course I knew who
I
Anna
remember
Wintour was.
that, yeah.
I knew Tina Brown, Graydon Carter. So I just thought, I need to know who these people are. Annie's going to ask me about someone. I'm going to have no idea. So for like a month, every night, I would take home a stack of the Rolodex cards and memorize the cards so that if she asked me about someone, I would at least know where they worked. It was a lot more formal. And I think that people called people a lot more. When I first started, I would send faxes. I would be like standing in front of a fax machine of a typed letter that I would say Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so or whomever. You would always address them respectfully and formally. I can't even imagine now, like, anyone memorizing like Rolodex cards or knowing any of that stuff.
Your parents give you a little leeway. You're not expected to maybe start a job in June, but were you nervous?
Graduate school went into the fall because I had to write like a mini dissertation to kind of get out of the master's program. So I started working in April, and I didn't realize it right away, but I realized it probably 6 months or maybe even a year in, that my education did actually serve me well, because I did study art history and I was pretty well read, since I read all the time.
Right.
And I realized that I loved storytelling. And I think that's why I read so many books, because I love that escapism of going into a different world. And I started believing and living that kind of storytelling, which for me was so interesting, because Annie builds a story, and that's like it's like a little, kind of book being told every time.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to ask just about going to grad school and then starting as an assistant. I think some people get tripped up with, I'm too qualified for that, or I have all of this education, I should be doing ...
I didn't think that at all. I was just so happy to have a job.
Yeah.
And my salary was so small. And I remember calling my parents, my dad, and telling him I got a job, and he was so happy. But then when I told him my salary, he said, well, how does that work? And I said, oh, you're going to be paying my rent until I can figure it out. But, I love books. So for me to start working on a book and doing research, and a book on women, and so many of my icons were in that book. But it was like a mix of famous and not famous women. And I remember 2 of my first meetings about the book. One of them was with Gloria Steinem, and I was so nervous. And at that point, I guess it was probably a year into working for Annie.
So she knew your name,
yeah, she
that
knew
took
my
a while
name.
for you.
Yeah, she wasn't calling me the new girl anymore. Yeah. And I didn't think I was going to get fired. I would go into her office like every other week with my bag. It was always on a Friday, because I thought that was the day that people got fired.
But did something happen that would make you
No,
think
I just
that?
didn't think I was doing a good job, because on so many of the things I was doing, I was so in over my head, because I had no practical knowledge of how to do it.
Right.
And I'm a
there's
problem
no
solver.
Course.
No. And I was like, what do you mean I have to rent a car to get people to the shoot? And I was like, who do I call?
Whatever they needed, figure it out.
Yeah, and you figure it out. And there was no handbook.
Well, and that's a skill in itself.
I think,
the ability to figure it out.
Right, you have to be resourceful.
Without Google, let's remember.
Yeah, there was no Google. But I think also, there were so many people that were so helpful. And I think looking back now, 26 or 27 years ago, I think I definitely did not go into the position arrogant or entitled. I was very grateful. And I think that I was very naive and earnest. And I think people responded to that, because I was so transparent. I would meet someone, like I remember meeting Grace Coddington for the first time on a shoot. And I walked right over to her, and I was like introduced myself and shook her hand and hugged her or something. I just didn't know.
But did
that you weren't supposed to wear an orange sweater on a shoot. Like you were supposed to wear all black.
That's one thing I was told right away off the bat, becoming Anna's assistant, was don't wear black. So it's funny, but yeah, I think it does really help to have someone there that's guiding you. I took over someone's position that was moving into a different department. So in my mind, great, she's still at the magazine if I have any questions. But it was the opposite. She was going to meet Katharine Graham and would go there for monthly tea. Mrs. Graham, obviously, for me. I knew her LA stuff. I knew who she needed in Paris, Milan. I didn't know Washington. That wasn't something I had taken notes on. And she needed to book a car service. And I had no idea, because the ones we use in New York didn't have a service in DC. So I called Melissa, and she said, I don't know. So I just figured it out. Ann Buford, worked as the publicist for the magazine straight across from my desk. She helped me, and she said, Melissa does now. She goes there once a month. And after the fact, Melissa came over and apologized. She said she did that.
Right.
She just didn't want to help me. You learn right off the bat, like, you don't really lean too much on anyone else and find your own way to do things.
Right.
Too.
And I think every person in every position changes things a little bit and makes it better or makes it worse or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you have to make it your own.
No, I used color file folders, and Melissa came by and said, oh my gosh, Anna only likes blue file folders. And I go, how do you differentiate between the files? You know, like
Right.
B is pink and Charlie's blue and Anna's yellow. And
Right.
she's like, oh, good luck. I'm like, if I get fired over colored file folders, it's not the right job for me.
No,
this
but
is how this keeps me organized, and she needs me to be organized. You know?
Sometimes these systems that are put in place are not by the person that you work
Right,
with.
right.
So that's the other thing, is like trying to navigate that.
Yeah.
When I first started working at the studio, people used landlines. We were using cell phones, but I kept mine off all the time because I was afraid to put it on because I didn't know, because I thought it was gonna be too expensive. And even though the office covered it, and I remember at some point Annie's like, how come I can't reach you on your cell phone? It goes right to voicemail. And I was like, oh, because I never put it on. And she's like, well, no, that's the whole point. Have a cell phone so I can reach you. And I'm like,
Right.
oh, okay. But there was a landline, and there was 5 lines, a different
course.
dedicated line.
Yeah.
So line 4 was dedicated to Annie. So Annie, at
Right.
that point,
Yep.
I think the first couple of months I worked there, she wasn't even in the office because she was shooting every single day. She still shoots
I'm
a
like,
lot,
she's still-
but it was like every single day. Line 4 would ring, and the only person that could answer it was the studio manager, who was Cara Glynn at the time.
Yeah.
So Cara, I think, was in the restroom, and the phone is ringing, and I was like, should I answer it? Should I
something
not
so
answer it?
similar that
I was so
happened to me.
anxious, and I was like, should I answer
Yeah.
it? It's line 4. And I
Right,
remember like
right.
saying to everyone in the office, it's line 4, it's
Yeah.
line 4. And
Yeah.
everyone's like, don't answer it. I'm like, but I don't want Cara to get in trouble. Like,
Yeah.
she's in the bathroom. This is crazy. I think I can just answer it. So I pick up the phone. I'm like, hello, studio. And Annie thinks I'm Cara at first. And I'm like, no,
Right.
it's not Cara. She's like, where's Cara? And I said, oh, Cara's in the restroom. I'll have her call you right back. She's like, but who's this? I'm like, it's Karen. She's like, who? Like, she didn't know. I don't think she knew who I was. And it was so out of context.
Yeah.
And I was like, I work in the office? Like, I was like, what? I had no idea. And
No, I know.
I think there was an honesty to it, because
Right.
even with like the dressing all in black, I remember going to a shoot and someone
I can't imagine that. I rarely even see you.
well, everyone was always in dark because they had to like blend in.
Right, of course.
So
That makes
I
sense,
like
though.
showed up in like one of my outfits on like one of the first shoots, and someone from Vanity Fair said, I can't believe you dress like that. You can't dress like that on set. And I remember being so upset and thinking like, I can't go home to change.
Right.
Like, I've really screwed this up.
I feel bad for
so
you.
then like after I got to know Annie better, because I like just was like, okay, I'm just gonna wear all dark clothing to the office. I'm gonna start wearing more jeans. I'm not gonna wear skirts. And then I was like, that's not really who I am. So I thought at some point maybe we'll have a conversation about it or something. And then like down the road, I remember saying to her, I said something like, I hope you're okay, like with how I dress in the office. I like to dress up. I like to wear funky clothing. And she was like so sweet about it. She's like, that's what I love about you. It's so much fun. I like seeing what you're gonna have on every day, kind of thing. There's so much misguided information that people tell you something and who knows why. And I always hope that like anyone that I'm mentoring or helping, that I actually am doing it in a positive way.
Yeah, and it's a different generation now too. I remember my first day, Andre walking by my desk going, what is that nail polish? Is it a Halloween party? And I'm like, what? It's black, it's cool. And he's like, no. And just like you see in the movie, like the nail polish remover comes to my desk and all of that. When you mentioned the phone story, it's funny because when I worked for Brian Lord and Kevin Huvane at CAA, I was their shared, more like personal assistant. So they each had a trainee running calls with them at all times. Either if Kevin's in the car, there's always that first assistant, the agent in training. Then there's a second assistant for each. So I should have never had a reason to have to answer a phone call. Like,
Right.
But Brian's line was ringing and ringing. The other line, someone was on. So I figured Jeremy, the first assistant trainee, was on it. So I answered it. but I was nervous. I had been filing something. Brian Lord's office, it's Pitt. And I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, so I put him up, hold on, sorry, one minute. I'm trying to buzz in, hoping Jeremy's going to pick up my line to ask who's on it, but he's not. So I have to get back on. Sorry, just hold on one more minute. I don't even know what I sounded like, but I do know when you hear what happens. So finally, Jeremy answers. I go, it's Pitt. It's Brad Pitt. And Brian gets on, and we're able to listen to calls because at that point we're listening if it's about sending scripts.
Right, like note-taking.
Yeah, and knowing what role they're talking about, because we'll have a pile of scripts based on their conversation that are going to be sent to his house. And the first thing Brad says is, what's up with that assistant of yours? It seems like she needs Prozac or something. She's going to jump. And he's thinking, like what happened to you, it's Kath, the other female assistant, the second in line, who would have been the one to answer the phone. But Brad goes on and on, like she needs a straitjacket and all of this. And I am just crushed. And I'm so nervous that Brian's going to find out it was me, but Kath wasn't on the line. I admitted to her later that Brad Pitt thought she needed help because Brian was like, no, Kath's great. And I'm like, oh, phew. But no, it's stressful.
I know, it is so stressful. When I think back at the beginning years, I was operating on like a level that I don't even know if I slept, because we were also young and working hard all the time.
Yeah.
And we actually cared about our jobs.
Right.
We cared so much. We always wanted to deliver. And I think we have similar personalities in that way, that like we would have stayed up all night if we had to figure something out that we didn't know how to do.
But yours is harder because every day is totally different. Setting up a shoot or finding a team or a location in Texas one day and then having to go, a Vuitton campaign in Africa. Was there something at that first couple of years that you really messed up, or that you did but somehow it got fixed, or a time that you were like, holy shit?
After the book was done, which was 99, at that point, being the research assistant, I kind of like started dovetailing into like doing production work. So not only was I researching, but I was executing. If Annie wanted to photograph someone, I would like send the initial letter, have her vet it, kind of thing. And then I would set up the shoot, because they were smaller shoots. It was for a book.
Right.
So it wasn't a big team. So I started learning about that. Fortunately, I had a lot of friends that worked in the film industry or lived around the country or overseas. So if we were doing a shoot somewhere, I had friends that I could call.
I don't think people realize, the youngsters, how hard it was doing this stuff without a search engine. You know what I mean?
No, you had to. I would call someone that I knew, you would call like.
Yeah, we figured it out.
What was it like? What, dial 0 for information? I don't even know. There was like something for sure
I know.
that because you had to find out the number. I guess we used phone books.
Yeah, it's like how we used maps.
I mean, it makes it sound like we're 100 years old.
I know.
Phone book.
But Kevin Mulligan used to buzz me in to come into his office. I always thought I was getting fired, and give me a stack of papers. The papers were pages ripped out of magazines with things circled that he wanted me to get him. But he'd rip them so I couldn't even see what magazine it was in. So it was a circled lamp, but it was an Evian ad. He wanted the lamp in the Evian ad. Just like Anna, you don't say, no, just figure it out. So call Evian, find out who did the ad campaign, call that production company, who was the set designer, the props person. You figure it out.
And you had to. I mean,
ta-da, here's the lamp. It's not what I thought it was going to be. And everything, shipping things back and forth. What I learned is everyone's got a price. I had to get cufflinks. I remember navy blue silk knot cufflinks on a Sunday night for Brian, who was in New York meeting Clinton, and Barney's was closed. He was meeting the next morning for breakfast. So it's finding someone that will go back to Barney's, reopen the store, and get to the St. Regis, the navy blue silk knot cufflinks. But you figure it out.
We're able to do that.
Yeah.
Because now you can't even do that. Like, no one is going to go and open the store for you. Or you're not going to have that personal connection with people. Yeah. Because everyone was in the same boat and we were all trying to figure things out. So you would call in so many favors.
Yeah. Well, I just threw money at it.
Yeah, throw money. Yeah.
That wasn't an issue. So,
And even like being in LA and not having Google Maps.
The Thomas guy.
Like opening it up. I remember like
and a pager.
Yes.
I had a pager.
I had a pager too, and I'd have to pull over, go to a payphone, use my phone card, put it in. I'm not a good driver, as you know.
Yeah, right.
And being a production assistant or any of those things, you have to drive. And I'm like, how am I going to avoid driving? I cannot drive Annie in any
PA on
city.
commercials.
No way that I can do this. It was usually a photo assistant or maybe another PA locally would drive. So I got away with it for a long time. But I remember one time in LA, I don't know what happened. And all of a sudden it was like me and Annie, and we had a car. And I was like,
and does she sit in the front?
I was like, rock, paper, scissors. Who's going to drive that car?
With Annie?
Yes, because I was like, I'm not a good driver. And she's like, come on, you're fine. You can drive. And I was like, okay, but I'm.
And she sat in the front with you?
Okay. So we had been working together for years. So it wasn't like I was, but I just thought.
I mean, if you're saying rocks, paper, scissors to her,
I'm really like a horrible driver. Like, and I'm a nervous driver. Yeah. So, of course, we pull out, we start driving. I get pulled over right away. And sirens. And I'm like, this isn't happening. And I keep on driving. And Annie's like, I think they're pulling you over. And I go, for what? And she goes, I think you crossed a double line. And I was like, okay. So then the cops come over.
Was she laughing?
Yeah, she was laughing. I was freaking out. I was like, okay, now I'm going to be like put in the clinker. So the cop comes over and I was like, I'm so sorry. And then he's like, are you Annie Leibovitz?
Oh,
anyway, yeah.
Wow.
He recognized her.
That's
so
good.
I said, can I please just not get a ticket? Can we just not do that? Or can we just do it quickly? Because we had to be somewhere or something. And I was like, this is just horrible. So
and no Uber.
Yeah.
Remember,
so he
guys,
was. So
in LA, no taxis.
Yeah. So the cop was like, it's okay. It's okay. We're having a softball game later on today, so why don't you come by and watch the softball game? And I was like, I actually have to work, but we'll see. And he's like, she'll come. We just drove off. Of course, I never went to the softball game or whatever. But yeah, and then I had to drive her one other time, and that time wasn't so catastrophic. But yeah, I successfully avoided driving.
With all the news now, and it's been going on for the past year of these designers hopping houses, same thing with celebrities and their brand deals. No one seems to stay in one place for too long. You've been there a long time. Listen, I was at American Vogue for a long time. I know my reasons for staying, good and bad, but what keeps you there? Have you...
Stockholm Syndrome? No, I'm teasing. It's interesting. You think you know who you're going to be when you're in your 20s, and it's sometimes so different than what you ever imagined you're going to do or be or where you're going to live or any of those things. But I think for me, the job is always interesting.
Right.
Yes, she's a photographer and she does photo shoots, but I also get to work on books and exhibitions and special projects, and I have clients,
it's not
and there's a
it's
gallery.
Not the same. Every day's not the same.
And there's like the fine art side of things. There's the publishing side. There's the day-to-day shoots. So there's so many different aspects of the job that it's always interesting.
And as her agent, you've actually even brought her work that is not even traditional necessarily.
Right, because I think at some point you have to think out of the box. And I think that from when we started, the world has changed. Even as of 10 years ago, it changed. There's like all these like shifts that happen, and it's either you pivot and you figure out how print to digital. When Annie started shooting digitally, we went from fax to email, landlines to cell phone. We're the generation that I think really had to navigate all this new technology.
No, for sure.
But I also think like what you were saying about the designers, the thing that's interesting or not interesting, I don't know if that's the right word, is that people hop around because, one, they're not being shown the loyalty. Designers are artists, and they should be given the platform to be creative. And I think that it becomes this art and commerce situation.
And
where
you're not given time
to
introduce yourself. You're not given much time to be a hit. But there's growing pains with everything.
And now there's no one that's independently owned.
Yeah, they want someone different, but not too different.
Right. They have to sell, and you have these larger parent companies that are telling you, where's the black dress?
So then why? I told myself, the minute I'm dreading 5 days of my life to live for 2, I'm going to leave the job. I don't want to dread going to work. That's a lot of time spent in your life to not enjoy. You don't have to think it's fun, but don't dread it.
Right.
you're working, but if you can enjoy a career when it's a career, not work, if it's a passion, not work. I used to get excited Sunday nights to go back. I mean, that's crazy. And I probably had Stockholm Syndrome too, but every day was different.
Right.
And we get to work with cool people, smart people. How do you think Annie has stayed around so long? I feel like the OGs are still working.
Well, I think because they're passionate.
Yeah.
I think as long as you stay passionate, you're always going to be
And
successful.
open-minded, maybe to
and
shift and change with the time.
Yeah, be flexible, and also wanting to continue to be relevant.
Right.
But for both Annie and Anna, it's a huge responsibility that they have, because they have paved the way for so many other people, and they have to show up and they have to deliver all the time. There's always people that want those people to fail. You know, even women.
Has she ever been nervous or ever?
Oh, she's nervous all the time.
But about her legacy?
She doesn't think that way. She's kind of lives in the moment, which is also really interesting.
Right.
Doesn't look back that much unless she's working on a book or something like that.
Research or something.
But she's always looking forward. Even day to day, at the job is looking forward, because we're looking at dates ahead of where we are.
That's what was
because
weird
we're
about
setting up
magazines.
shoots. It's February 8th, but we're looking at shoots that we're doing at the end of February or March. It's always the future. But I think also, like, you and I are fiercely loyal. We always want to believe. Like, we're believers. And even when it was like shitty and hard, and I'm sure both of us at points didn't like our jobs for one reason or another, or it's too hard or like stressful or whatever it was.
Stress.
It's the stress.
And
like,
the
I think
responsibility. Like, I had to do covers. If someone else messed up their shoot or couldn't find the right model, is fine. They're inside. There is no magazine without the cover.
Right.
And that's a lot just on me.
Exactly. It was like a lot of pressure. And I think that.
And then egos. I mean, egos are, and we both know, like, that's just a segue. What's the secret sauce or the superpower? I know how I managed the tricks and the things you have to do to kind of swap your wording. So you're telling them what they should do with it seeming like a suggestion, so that when they repeat it back to you, it seems like they're telling you exactly what you want them to.
Yeah.
And that's perfect. I don't need the credit for it.
Yeah.
I just need it to get done this way.
Yeah. But I think for us, it was navigating so many different types of personalities. Right. But that's also interesting. It's like a big, gigantic puzzle.
Right.
But like you were saying earlier, it's a privilege to work with people that are smart and creative and passionate. And I'll never take that for granted. I think I've done things in the last 25 years that I would never do in any other job. Right. And I'll never take it for granted. Right. And I'll never be like, oh, I went to the White House.
What are the shoots that, knowing that we both are around celebrities all the time, I book celebrities, so it's not like I'm jaded by it, but it is what I do for work, so...
Right, but and we couldn't act like we cared.
Yeah,
you had to be like,
I didn't care because
it was a job, and you're like, I just hope they show up.
I'd be interested to know, were there people you had to book that you just despised for either political views or maybe how they acted on a set the last time?
Once they agree to be photographed, I think that they then are okay with it. People just don't like to be photographed, and it's a hard thing. I think actors, especially, because moving image is so different than a still image.
And they have to be themselves, especially with Annie. She wants you,
raw,
white t-shirt. You cannot shave, men. You cannot shave. And all I can tell them is, tell the publicist, please, Annie does not like clean shaven. How they show up, I'm not in the bathroom with them in the morning. But it has happened where I've gotten the call. And it's usually from Karen.
The clean shave. But then who was it that showed up? Because we had told them like a month prior, or 6 weeks prior or something. And they showed up.
That's always what they have to do. Bring a white t-shirt, something comfortable, a jean that you like, that you're comfortable in.
Don't cut your hair right before the shoot. Don't shave. And someone took it literally and showed up with like a full long beard. Who was it? I don't remember.
I can't.
What I think it was? I think it was Hugh Dancy.
Oh, that would make sense.
That
For
he
that,
should-
I know, because now
For
I'm thinking,
betrayal.
yeah, with Michael Shannon. Yeah,
and Karen
he
Nelson.
does have a beard in
No,
that.
but he showed up
Yeah.
with like a full beard.
That, well, he's someone that would definitely take that.
and I don't think we even recognized him when he showed up. We were like, who's that guy?
Oh, and Annie
who's that
was,
kid?
had a crush on Michael Shannon.
I know.
So did
Grace.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my
exactly.
God. Well, is there someone of all the people, and I'm sure there's multiple people, that you were just starstruck by? And
I mean, there's so many because
Yeah.
it's like
Some actors and actresses
But like who?
that have that like Hollywood, that they feel like a movie star. I guess I never really understood like celebrity versus movie star
Right.
until Brad Pitt walked into the room. Or someone like that where you're just like,
and did you guys
that is a
shoot?
movie star. That's
And you
not
guys shot
a
him
celebrity.
alone. That would be for Vanity Fair.
Yeah. So the first time, yeah, he was on the cover of Vanity Fair. It was a long time ago. And they did the shoot somewhere upstate New York or something. I can't remember exactly. But he accidentally came to our office because he thought
Oh my God.
the fitting was at our office. And it was when we were on West 26th
Oh, you
Street.
did a fitting? Too?
Yeah, no, everyone did fittings, or they would go and meet
yeah.
the stylist or meet who was writing the article. It was a lot more casual, and
Probably
people
for Vanity Fair, not
and
just-
people gave a lot more time.
Yeah.
They weren't like, I have 2 hours and that's it. And he ended up coming to our office instead of Vanity Fair
Just
for
by
some reason.
himself?
Yes. So he was like ringing the buzzer, and like we would pick up the phone and say, "Hello, studio," and they would, whoever was outside. And
It's
he's
funny,
like,
this is a Brad Pitt
Yeah.
story after my Brad Pitt.
and he's like, "It's Brad," and everyone's like, "Who's Brad?" So then like someone got up and they're like, I forget who it was, but they were so nervous that they didn't even ask him to come in. And like, so then he's just like standing in the like vestibule, and I was like, everyone's just like, I'm like, I think you're in the wrong place. I'm like, I think you're supposed to be at Vanity Fair. And it was when Vanity Fair was 4 Times Square.
Yeah.
So we had to lead him, and we were like, can you get there? Like because he didn't
he
have
have
a car. Like he was so chill. He had like a
Yeah.
t-shirt. It was not like he was
Yeah.
with anyone, which is wild.
Yeah.
That was probably 20 years ago
Oh my God.
because he was very young. But remember when we were doing the Angelina
Yeah.
Jolie shoot in the desert, and he showed up on his motorcycle? Everyone was like,
Well,
"Wow,
yeah,
swooning."
because
it was
he
like,
was filming. We were shooting in Barstow, where they were married at the time, obviously, and that's where their planes were. She flew from LA, her first solo flight without her instructor, and just her assistant, Holly, who I
Right.
remember when they landed, was like, I did not know
Right.
this was going to be a solo flight without the co-pilot. And he was filming in Vegas. So Barstow's halfway between the two. And he was filming one of the Ocean's films. And he was with his instructor.
and then he like had a motorcycle or something.
Yeah, because that must have been his, because that's what I
Or
have
what-
that photograph.
Might have rented it or something.
Or I think we did, because remember in LA, they had just had Shiloh, I believe. But Phyllis did that shoot, and Angelina came in to the L'Ermitage for the fitting, and right away was like, wait a second, what's up with these clothes? And at that point, she had seen me before, right? And I think we pretty much had different stylists on a lot of the shoots. And I tried to explain to her that it was the best of the New York collections. And she was wondering why it's a January cover, why does it look like spring? And I'm like,
Right.
well, like da-da-da. And then she saw the shoes, and basically she said, I just had a baby and I just want to look sexy. I'm picturing leather pants, a white tank top on a motorcycle. And we're thinking, this is not Maxim. We have Oscar de la Renta and Carolina Herrera on the rack, and we do not have leather. And it was made clear that she's not.
And that, yeah.
I even helped Phyllis's assistant go around all day to stores pulling tank tops, leathers. That's when we got the rag and bone
Trench coat, yeah.
Yeah, because that was in the store. We
Right.
went to Barney's and just pulled. She wanted the red lip, da-da-da. So I can only imagine that's how the motorcycle.
Yeah.
Because it would have been
exactly.
a last minute.
Yeah,
it was
'cause I just
pretty
remember,
clear
but
she
he-
was not even putting those dresses on. Those shift
Right,
dresses.
right.
It was like so not.
No, but I remember we were on the tarmac shooting, And from the distance, Brad was on
Yeah.
the motorcycle
Yeah, almost like
driving
it
in.
was-
And
yeah.
even Annie's male photo assistants, they're like, there's Brad Pitt.
Yeah,
You know,
I
everyone's
remember I
kind
got
of,
to go and
yeah.
say hi to him in the
Yeah.
trailer, but no, it was very movie-esque.
Yeah,
you
it was
know?
like a setup. Like,
Yeah.
it was definitely setting us up.
She made it clear to us that she had to go back to the kids. Like she was going to come in and out the 2 days. Well, we had been there the day before in this motel, which if Annie was there was the best of the motels. And
No, but it was like
there's
a-
not many. And it was
Yeah.
the plastic on the toilet seat.
It was in a strip mall. There was a gas station in front of the hotel.
I remember bumping into everybody at the vending machine.
Because there was no food.
Yeah, Nick Rogers, I saw him at the vending machine. That's what we ate. And just a funny story that I was so obsessed with working out at the time that I knew there was a Gold's Gym nearby. There's nothing. It's a highway.
Yeah, it
It's
was
like
a highway. It wasn't even like a strip mall.
And the jewelry guard seemed like a buff guy. And I had asked him, like, oh, do you work out? And he had his own car. And he's like, yeah. I go, well, should we wake up early and go to Gold's Gym in the morning? We woke up probably at 5 a.m. or something. And he goes, sure, meet me down in the lobby and we'll go to Gold's Gym. I'm like, great. So he gave the box of jewelry to the front desk and he said, can you put this in the safe? And the woman said, of course. So we go to Gold's Gym, we get back, we're checking in. I mean, it's a small motel and there's someone different behind the desk. And he goes, I need to get a box out of the safe. And the woman goes, we don't have a safe. And he's like, wait, what? And she goes, oh, this box? And basically, he was like, almost shit himself like that. He was there because you need a guard if the jewelry is over, what, $1 million?
Yeah, it's $1 million you knew.
So he had the box of the jewelry.
Yeah.
And then I go, can we go tomorrow morning? And he goes, no. I go, but we could put the box right by my treadmill. He's like, no. So I called a cab company and I'm like, oh, I want to get a cab for tomorrow morning to go to Gold's Gym. And she goes, oh, sorry, our cab is going to the airport. I go, you only have one cab? She goes, yeah, sweetie. I go, can you give me a number for another cab company? She goes, we're the only one.
Yeah.
And I was like, we are in a small
No,
ass
we were in the
place.
middle of.
Yeah. But anyway, it's not like we shot when it was dark, but it was thinking ahead
Yeah.
at the end of the trip if she can see the horizon. And it was too late. So we're freaking out like, you're going to stay in this. She goes, listen,
She was cool about-
I've slept in dirt with
Right.
a tent. All I need is a toothbrush and a tank top, and that'll be more than I've had many places I've been.
Yeah, she was so easy about it and so
but of
chill
course, I
because
don't think we even got her a toothbrush, by the way.
it wasn't in the vending
Yeah,
machine.
and she shared a room with Holly.
Yeah, no, I know.
And then there was also, I just remember she had her hair and makeup people. And at the time she was using the makeup artist who had worked on Monster, the Charlize Theron movie. And I was like, she'd used airbrushing. So it was so windy in this, is a desert?
Yeah, no, it was. There was a storm. Remember, we had
that
to
it
wear
would
goggles.
stick to the airbrushed makeup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was at the end of the day when we were like rapping and people were kind of blowing over. And there's like so much dust everywhere. I remember it was crazy.
Yeah, and
but that was the first time we met. Was on
The first Angie shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to think about it the other day because I know she was with Billy Bob at that time. It was, 2002? Yeah. But did she have Maddox? Had you photographed her with Maddox?
That was after.
After. So that was the first time Annie photographed.
I think it was the first time Annie photographed her as a cover alone.
Okay.
But I believe prior to that Vogue shoot that Angie was part of one of the Vanity Fair Hollywood covers.
Okay. That would make sense
Like,
for Gia. But I'd
can't
been
remember the
trying
timeline.
for quite a while to get her. So I just remember, and Holly was with her. That's the first time her assistant.
And we shot in the
Yeah,
studio.
and it was on a
26th Street.
weekend.
Yeah, it was the weekend. And Tawny was the editor, Tawny Goodman. Angie showed up and didn't like any of the clothing.
Yeah, it was kind of based around Tom Ford's YSL caftans and stuff.
Right, and it was
That
a lot
the
of
collection.
animal prints.
Yeah, animal prints.
We weren't going to shoot in the studio. We were going to go on location. And then for some reason, and I can't remember why, we totally pivoted and then built sets. And we shot Saturday, Sunday, though, right? 2 days. It's 2 days because we had never met in person.
Right.
And that was the first time we met in person.
And I think that was probably my first shoot with Annie because that's 2002 is when we started doing a lot of celebrities. I believe Marion Jones had happened before that, but I wasn't on that.
Yeah.
But for people that don't know, we don't really shoot in order. So simultaneously, I'm working on the Gwyneth cover. By that point, I'm booking 8 to 10 covers a year of celebrities. Right. So we're pretty much all lined up, and we can shoot as early as we have access to the clothes. So we had Gwyneth and Angelina. Gwyneth was March that year. Angelina's Shape.
And the Gwyneth shoot was that Monday, Tuesday, right after. That's why we
right. So that's why we would have had all the racks of clothes all approved by Anna already, set for both. Because we did Gwyneth with her Brits. So we had 2 things.
And Tawny was doing both of them, because that was when she was doing all the covers. And when Angie said that she wouldn't wear any of the clothing, Tawny said, okay, I'll be right back.
But what was it about animal print? Because it's like cotton or silk.
No, she just wasn't interested. She's like, this is not my style.
And I know she said something like, I don't want to be crawling on the ground.
And I think she wanted something more feminine, because I think the Gwen stuff was definitely cooler and it was different.
Yeah. It was body conscious.
Yeah, exactly. So Tawny went to Vogue and swapped it out.
Yeah. I mean, there is a whole thing about a weekend getting into the Condé Nast building. But yeah, I mean, I almost feel like I went with her, but it's so long ago.
You might have, because it was like,
because we get all the racks.
We're talking about it very calmly now, but we really did not have any clothing. And I just remember having to go and tell Annie that Angie didn't like the clothing. And Annie was like, can we just shoot her?
Well, it's funny because
shoot her what she came in. I'm like, it's a cover. We can't.
Vogue, yeah. And I just told the story about her later on. So the fact that this happened every shoot and we acted surprised each time it happened.
I know, because
like we have another one that it happened on.
No, I know.
And gotten to yet, but
it's interesting because even when we did have her involved, she still didn't like stuff.
Yeah,
particular.
You know what? At that point, I have to say, most celebrities dreamed about being on Vogue. There was not a conversation, do you want to wear this? Or any requests for boards. It just wasn't that time.
No, they would show up and they would put on.
You wear what.
And they would do a fitting that day. And they would say what they preferred, but it wasn't like, there was not a conversation about.
Yeah, because we would have known right away then if there was any conversation.
But wasn't there something that Gwyneth had seen the clothing? She did the fitting before the weekend.
That would make sense.
So when she got to the shoot that she was on, the clothing was all of a sudden not body conscious.
Well, and I'll tell you, recently I was looking at that issue. I mean, I have them all here, and that is one of my favorite covers of all time, especially my favorite cover that Herb did. He had that magic hour down pat, and it was stunning and beautiful, her on a rock, but we really only ran 2 images inside. So for Gwyneth, who was a Vogue girl, who was a fashion girl and has a model body, that had to be the reason, maybe.
Right. Yeah, who knows?
And there was an animal print. It wasn't the cover, but I saw it inside. Tawny was probably freaking out. You do a fitting so that you can show up on set and you're all ready to go. You send the fitting pictures to the photographer. They start thinking what look goes with what location or what setup. So you're unraveling that entire thing. And then what about the sets? Because I know it was pretty bare. It was like a chair.
Yeah, it was just like kind of a wall and a floor. And it was all like those pastel colors.
Yeah, it was
and then
just,
there would be
really
like a chaise, a chair.
Exactly.
It was very simple, very studio, but not a studio wall.
And it's funny because she did move around.
I mean, she's amazing.
I mean, that's one of my all-time favorite covers.
Those photographs of her are so beautiful, though, because she really is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Knows herself really well, though. Yeah. Being on set with people that are not nervous and they're confident and they know who they are and what they look like, that's so helpful to the whole story.
Right.
They know that this won't look good on me, or I don't look good with my hair like this, or whatever. Right. And that really helps because then it's more authentic.
The next one with her we did, was in Barstow. Right.
And then after Barstow,
Santa Barbara.
But then she did Vanity Fair in between that.
Oh, and okay.
With Maddox. That was at the Ritz in Paris.
The way to get her was really to say it's Annie. And it's funny, especially that last cover being involved on the creative calls. It's like she wanted it based on a famous surrealist film director. So we're all in Annie's studio doing this conference call, and it's just Angie on the other side because she never had a publicist.
And it would be funny because they always were saying the same thing, but it seemed like they were saying opposite things. So it was like trying to decipher were they agreeing that they wanted to do it, or were they saying they didn't want to do it? Like, it was hard to understand.
We did multiple calls because it's like, come back to me when you understand. And we're like, we have no idea what just happened on that call. Like, Feathers and Maddox is going to be a director and surrealist, but real. Like,
they went to their house. That's the thing. There was a trust.
Yeah.
That public figures are very protective of their children. And when someone agrees to have their children be part of the picture, it's a big deal. And we never take that for granted because Annie is so respectful of that. She knows that's not something that a lot of people agree to. So when she agreed, that was kind of huge.
I remember with that last cover, the whole thing was about the kids.
Yeah, it was.
We really wanted the kids. We really wanted Brad. But I remember even on the calls when we were still in New York, it was, I'm not going to force my kids to ever be photographed. If they want to, sure. And it's like, okay.
Oh, yeah. And we were building the whole story around the kids.
Right, exactly.
So the day of, we could have been told that they didn't want to participate.
Right.
Like,
and
if they woke up and they weren't in the mood, or they didn't want to.
And I remember her saying in one of those calls, like, well, you know, if you could get like some entertainment, like they get bored quickly, you know, I'll ask them to come down to the beach, but it's on you to entertain them long enough to get the picture of them. So it was get like popcorn machines or cotton candy.
And we got costumes
and circus performers. And I actually thought they were going to be in the pictures.
No, they were just there for the entertainment.
And did we know that no one was coming with the popcorn machine and the cotton candy? Like,
I don't know, because
you were running
I was running the popcorn machine and the cotton candy.
I know.
And I had to wear the
pineapple hat.
I was going to say, and I had to wear the hat and the costume.
I do really respect that.
I mean, that's a mom. You know, she's a mom first.
Yeah.
That is something with her. I think she really is a mom first.
I do remember that with Angie on that shoot as well, there was the clothing issue. I think because I was pregnant and I remember it was a bit traumatic. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I know there was a zebra and a sweater that looked like a zebra.
The black and white striped sweater.
Yeah, but
that she ends up on the cover.
Right.
In the end, we didn't have that much clothing on the shoot.
That actually that worked, that fit.
That because it was already edited down before we even got to Santa Barbara. In Angie's defense, every time, the reason she doesn't like something makes total sense.
Right. Exactly.
But it's not like it's coming out of nowhere.
Oh no, she gives you a long explanation.
You know, and it's a thoughtful one.
Yeah.
And I remember in Santa Barbara, I feel like everything was the same. It was a lot of like slinky or silky slip dresses. You know, I think she was thinking like, I'm at home with my kid. We're going to be on the beach and I'm going to be barefoot. And what should I be wearing? This doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
Because I think she never wants it to seem like a fashion shoot.
Right.
She's kind of anti-fashion.
Yeah.
Where you kind of have to take the fashion out of the narrative.
Well, I just remember the feather conversation. What color feathers? There was a delay and Annie was trying to get it going. It was that shot that Maddox was behind the camera.
Yeah.
And we're on the beach and it was this whole thing, what color t-shirt Maddox was going to wear, but that depended on what she was going to wear. I don't know if you asked me what color feathers. So I went over to her. We have white feathers, we have black feathers, we have colorful feathers. Well, the feathers should definitely be white, right? Because Maddox is in black and I'm in black. I'm like, yeah, great. Yeah, they should definitely be white. I totally agree with you. Then it's like, they should definitely not be white because then it looks like we killed a bird and the feathers. I'm like, oh, you're so right. You're kind of trying to go with her train of thought and agree, but then you have to quickly go against what you just agreed to. So you're the one looking like you just suggested shooting a bird out of the sky with white feathers. Like, but it's that type of, she's very interesting. And it really is a brain challenge. Well, she's figuring it out as she's talking.
Right.
So
and she's like one of the few that actually has ideas too.
Right.
She comes to the table with ideas. So it really is a collaboration. And she actually has great reference to film, art, history. She's well read. So she's coming to the table with a pretty strong idea of what she wants.
And we have
that's
to
interesting
figure out how to
execute it or interpret it and collaborate with her. Because in most cases, for Vogue, those shoots, we dictate what the creative is, and we say we want to do this, and
it's
these are
based on a fantasy,
and this is the clothing, and the person is really just along for the ride. Quite honestly, usually when it was those fantasy or any kind of storytelling or narrative, it's funny how people get into it.
Well, we're going to talk about all the work Annie did for Vogue on film sets. That was something we loved to do at Vogue. Whether it was covering a film like Chicago with Catherine Zeta-Jones and Renee Zellweger both being Vogue cover girls, or Moulin Rouge, which was highly stylized and in itself provided us with beautiful fashion with Baz's wife, Catherine
Martin,
who just did incredible costumes.
And she did all the sets too.
And all the sets, yeah. Moulin Rouge was one of my first cover bookings.
That was my first shoot that was on set. What a dream. Baz Luhrmann and CM, Catherine Martin, going to Australia. And what we were talking about, what was interesting about being on set for a film, that's something of the past. There was a real moment where studios wanted Annie or another photographer, whoever they were hiring, to be on set and to capture those stills from the moving image.
Right.
And also then spend another day and take portraits of the actors and actresses in the film, or maybe the director working, and more set-up shots. But getting that access was kind of incredible, and it was just something that happened because
scheduling was
the director usually would call Anna and say, I'm going to be doing a film, for example, with Baz Luhrmann and Moulin Rouge. It was Nicole Kidman and Ewan McGregor in the starring roles, and at that point, Baz had done Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
So everyone knew visually that he was a shining star. There was no way that this was not going to be a set that Annie didn't want to be on, because it was going to be completely compelling and beautiful and so thoughtful, every detail, because he and CM, who does all the sets and all the props and all the costumes, their attention to detail, it's magical right there. It's better than any set that you could ever create.
Right. But leading up to that, when we're shooting it, it's sometimes a year before it's coming out. Sometimes we actually had to shoot them right after wrap, sometimes a bit after wrap, and get the costumes back. But the ideal scenario is always being able to go on set while they're filming. So you're telling a story of an entire film through a portfolio, and they may have already filmed a very important scene that we need to capture a photo of to tell the story in the magazine. And people are on set at different times. Someone may wrap and not be coming back or going on to another film.
Right. And normally what would happen, for example, for Moulin Rouge, Baz Luhrmann was very collaborative. And the first thing you want is that the director is going to be okay to share confidential information prior to you arriving in Australia and on set, and also being willing to have you, that person being Annie, on set while he's filming.
Right.
Because he's actually doing his job. Right. And he is on a budget, and he has to make sure that he meets the budget.
Yeah. And the studio has to be cool with paying overtime.
Right. And you can't really,
the crew.
You can't, Annie can't say, okay, do that again or stop. Right. But Baz was very collaborative in that he understood the importance and knew when Annie was on set, like, he would take a break and have the actors and actresses stay in position for 2 minutes and then have her be able to photograph. But the Moulin Rouge was really interesting because they were filming on a soundstage in Australia, in Sydney. And we had the script in advance. We had some dailies, I think, that we saw in advance.
Costume images, of course.
Right. So we had all the kind of reference material that we had in the US and New York that we could build a story. So it was going to be a very small team going to Australia because they had everyone there. It wasn't like we were bringing fashion stylists or hair and makeup. Everything was there. So the only people that were going were really Annie Leibovitz, her photo assistants, and Ricky Floyd, who was Annie's set person at the time, that was going to help her find things, move things around. And then there was also Alexandra Couture, who worked at Vogue and was the editor that would go on the shoots that were not fashion shoots. We have all the sets that we want. We know exactly what we're doing. Everything's in order. So we're like excited. I'm not going.
And how many days are you planning on going to?
They were going.
That one was at least 5 spreads.
They probably went on a weekend. So Annie would go on set like on a Friday. They'd need a certain turnaround for the actors and actresses to be there on the second day. Say they were going to be there on Friday on set.
And the crew who's lighting.
Yeah.
And all of that.
At that point, I think Fox was his studio.
Yes.
So Fox.
Carol Sewell.
Yeah. They were at Fox sound stages in Sydney. They had a huge sound stage there where he always worked on that stage. And also Star Wars was always done on that stage. So they shared those stages if they were both filming. So Annie and the team head off to Australia. They land in LA before they go on to Sydney. And Alexandra calls me and said, have you heard anything? Because she was on the plane for 6 hours. She said, before I get on this long flight. And I said, no, we're all good. All the sets that we want are still up. They're ready to go. They're going to bring in the lighting crew to light them because these sets are so big that you actually have to have the crew to light it, and you have to have all the kind of union guys. So by the time they land in Australia, I have received a call saying that there was a miscommunication and all the sets had been taken down. So in the 18-hour
striking of the sets.
So the 18 hours that everyone was on the plane from LA to Sydney, the sets were taken down. And this is before you could get online on a plane. So I had to wait 18 hours before I could speak to anyone and tell them what was going on because they were locked at the plane. They landed first thing in the morning. They were going to go right to set. And I had to tell Alexandra that all the sets were dismantled and put into storage closets.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So Ricky Floyd had to work with the sets team and work through the night to rebuild pieces of the set on the soundstage, which they did. And the reality is, for a still, Annie doesn't need as big a set.
Right, you need a corner.
But they had to set up 6 different sets overnight. I was in New York. It's a 14-hour time difference. I stayed up the entire night because that was their daytime. Not that I could really do anything, but just providing any kind of support that I could while they did it. And they got it done. All the crew stepped in.
Yeah, everyone has to remember that this is the making of a movie. So us coming in to shoot it is not the schedule of sets being struck.
Right.
And how many people are involved in a movie. This is the process. You shoot that scene, you get a wrap, we're done.
You break it down.
Yeah, you break down. Yeah.
Yeah. Every set we've ever been on, there's always been that kind of situation that happens because at the end of the day, yes, they want us there. They want to collaborate, but they also are on a time schedule and a budget.
Right.
So if someone's not telling them,
there's another movie that's
it's coming in.
Yeah.
So but those Moulin Rouge pictures are some of my favorite pictures of all time.
Nicole have a knee injury?
She did from when she was the dancing scenes.
Yes,
of you
so that I remember
McGregor.
that was something that I think came up to me. Catherine Olam, who is an OG publicist, I remember getting that news that there are certain things she might not be able to do when Penny gets there. And I was so afraid it was going to be the swing because you're using your knee there. And then were there actors that had rapped? I love the John Leguizamo image of where you almost see how he was on his knees to be short, right? And you kind of get a sneak peek. It's almost like breaking down the wall of
the third wall. Yeah.
That was amazing. Star Wars, for Vogue, that was our first experience shooting fashion from a film on a set with a cover in costume,
right?
Which ended up being something we did quite often.
When I think about all the film sets that we were on and who the directors were, it really was about the director having almost like a similar vision as Annie aesthetically. Sofia Coppola, Julie Taymor,
Yeah.
and also going on multiple
Marshall.
Yeah, and going on multiple sets with these people. With Baz, we went on the set for Moulin Rouge, and then many years later, Australia. And I remember being on that set. They were late on delivery because they were overshooting, and Hugh Jackman was already having to start building up to be Wolverine. He couldn't bulk up that much because he was in Australia, but like he started not fitting into his clothing because he was getting into character for Wolverine. So it's like all these things in history.
Now that we're talking about not fitting into costumes, right away I'm thinking Walk the Line.
Right.
So, and again, that's Carol Sewell, that was Fox. Walk the Line was a great film to recreate. You have the nostalgia. You have these famous actors playing famous figures. This was one of those assignments. The film had already wrapped. We were going to pay homage to the costumes and the time period with fashion. So this was another way we would work with the film studio. If the costumes were Moulin Rouge level, of course, we would use the costumes that, whether it was for the whole story and the cover, it might be for the inside story, and then
The cover's different.
Have a designer inspired by the film or the character, do a couture piece or something very special for the cover star. But with Walk the Line, we were going to be doing fashion for Reese and then put Joaquin in costume.
Right, because Johnny Cash and June Carter Cash, their story.
Right.
So Reese Witherspoon playing June Carter and Joaquin Phoenix playing Johnny Cash, obviously. And going back to the South, going to
months
Tennessee.
after.
Right, we used some of the locations that they used in the film.
Yeah, we brought his band, the actors who actually play Johnny Cash's band in the film, but that shoot almost didn't happen. I remember getting the call from one of our favorite publicists, Sue Patricola, that Joaquin ended up going to rehab after that film, and he was just getting out, and it came up pretty quickly, the shoot dates from when he had just finished his rehab program, and going back
to play that character.
Yeah, going back to play that character, going back to Nashville, going back to the band, even the guys that he'd hang out with during the filming. That's probably something you're not supposed to do, but and the fact he didn't fit into the costumes.
Right.
There was little things that kept happening, but the biggest one is the house. So when June had passed, they ended up an auction of everything that was in
the house.
And that was right before we were going to shoot there.
Right.
So did we know that the house was going to be empty?
I don't think we did.
I don't think we did either.
I think when we did the location scout or when they filmed there, everything was still in the house.
I have these visions of us showing up, and I can always see Annie's face. I know the black toilet was there.
Right.
But when I look back at those images, how everything was recreated, I didn't know whether it was a props place or someone bought a lot of it. So I think I remember Mary
we got
having
it.
to go.
We got it back
And
from
then
that
the family,
person.
the kids, had
the
some
kids
stuff, like
had a
gold
lot of stuff.
records
Yeah,
and all
exactly.
of that. But yeah, that was pretty wild.
Well, that was having to recreate it, which always is so much harder because you're never gonna be able to do exactly what they did on the set.
Right.
But you're going to try to recreate it as best as you can.
And tell a story.
And tell the story. And the story was about June Carter and Johnny Cash.
Right.
And who doesn't love that story? So, and having Reese and Joaquin play those roles. And for them, too, it's probably hard because they've done that story. They finished filming. You know, you close the chapter on that. You're living and breathing being that character.
And you're doing something else then.
Yeah, and months later, we're saying, oh, by the way, you're going to go back into being June Carter and you're going to be Johnny Cash again. And that's what you need to do. And like to get back into it, that's where I admire actors so much that they can do that, especially if we're asking them to go back to the role that they played.
I remember Joaquin had his sponsor with him, which is very important, too. And that was something that, of course, we were going to respect and do anything and everything to make him the most comfortable. And I just think that's something that Annie's always good at, and just being very aware that these are human beings.
And also knowing what she wants to do and like sitting down with them and telling them what she wants to do and having that collaboration, like, how do you want to sit, or what are you comfortable doing, or like, you're going to stand in this one, and really laying it out for them so there's no surprises. They know creatively what she wants to accomplish.
I remember the chiggers, which I had no idea what those were when we arrived. And then I remember Joaquin playing a prank on you.
Right. So he came over to me, and these shoots are always pretty stressful because you have to get a lot done in a certain amount of time. And we were moving to all these different locations. We had extra people in some of the pictures that were like Dolly
being
Parton.
one of them, and Steve Earle.
Yeah.
Yes, in Keith Urban's recording studio.
Yeah. And Reese loves Dolly Parton.
And had never met her in
Steve
person.
Earle is such a legend. So you have these other people that you also have to take care of. They're not props. They're like as important. So it was very stressful, and we had only done like one picture, and Joaquin came over to me and he said, "Can I talk to you in private?" And I just thought, oh God, what is he going to want to talk to me about? And so there's not really any place to go that's private. We're like outside.
I can picture exactly
and
where
he's like, we can go behind this motorhome. And I was like, all right. And I was like, oh God, did I say something that insulted him? Did I not get him a coffee? Like, I'm thinking like, what the hell could he want to talk to me privately about? So we go behind the motorhome, and he says to me, he's like, I'm just not feeling this. And I'm like, okay, what do you mean? He's like, can I play someone else? Do I have to play Johnny Cash? And I thought, well, this is what we're doing. We're recreating an homage to the film, and you're John. I would really, really like to play a different character. I'm open to other characters, but I don't want to play Johnny Cash. And if I have to play Johnny Cash, I think I should just leave. You don't really need me. Just make the story about June Carter. And I'm standing there thinking, this is it. This is the day I get fired. I mean, this is the day that I don't know how to like get out of this scenario and convince Joaquin Phoenix that he has to play a character. Like, he's Joaquin Phoenix. I'm not going to be the one that like bends his arm.
Right.
So I'm walking away, and I said to him, okay, well,
I do think he said, I think Mark Ruffalo.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah,
Johnny Cash.
Yeah, he said someone else.
I remember
if you want,
so
if you want someone to play Johnny Cash, it could be Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah,
and I was like, well, that's really not the story we're telling. And in that kind of situation, you try to stay really calm. And all I could think in the back of my head is like, oh my God, this is so fucked up. Like, how am I going to get out of this? This is not something I can talk my way out of.
Right.
And he was like so serious. That makes him a great actor.
Yeah.
So I'm walking away, and I said, well, let me talk to Annie and see if there's another role that you can play. And I'm thinking like, this is it. So as I'm walking away, and he's like, wait 1 minute. And I was like, okay. And he goes, I'm totally fucking with you. And I was like, seriously? I think I like pushed him or something because I was like, you're so mean.
I mean, it was funny. Yeah, that ended up being such a great shoot.
I know. And it felt so good. There are these moments where everyone comes together and everyone's at their best.
Yeah.
And excited to be there, and it comes together and it feels good. Not every shoot's like that.
We had some doozies. I think the toughest one for me was Marie Antoinette because of how many people we had to get for that one picture.
Oh yeah, when we're in the...
And we were stand-ins for it. So if I'm even just picturing the image in my head, I'm seeing at least 10 people. Mary Nye, getting her on a train, Jamie Dornan on a plane, like getting everyone back to Paris. I don't know how you guys pulled off getting Versailles.
That was because Sofia Coppola had shot there.
Right. We were going to, so Grace's idea, Grace Coddington being just this legendary creative director, always had the best clothes, always did these incredible stories with Annie. And this was going to be specially made couture pieces by select.
Well, and that's why we did it around couture also. Like, and that's something we should talk about because that's such an interesting piece of all this, not to digress, but many years ago when we would do these fashion stories and they were these storytelling narratives, and it was always Annie doing these with Grace Coddington, who is the legend of all legends and probably the best fashion editor of all time. She and Annie would do these stories. For example, when they did Alice in Wonderland, Grace would write to the designers and ask them to specifically make a dress for our story. That would never, ever happen today. She was writing to Nicola Gesquier, who was at Balenciaga at the time, Karl
John
Lagerfeld.
Galliano.
And I remember being in meetings with her where Annie and Grace would be talking about the story narrative. And Grace would have these sketches that the designers did of the clothing that they were going to make for the story. And it was just incredible that these designers who are so busy loved doing it because they were part of it. And we weren't selling anything. We were actually, they were just creating. It was fully, completely, totally creative, a one-off dress that was made specific. I don't even think we had credits. The credit was John Galliano for whoever he was working for at the time.
And that was great because you had John in the image where Natalia Vadanova was wearing the design by John Galliano inspired by Alice. So it's the blue and white. It's some version of that, which, but with Marie Antoinette, we were doing the two different sides. And I remember when I booked this cover, I went to the studio, but I also, it starts with Marie Antoinette, and that's Kirsten Dunst. So this was her first cover, and we did her later for another Spider-Man, but the directive I was given by her publicist, Stephen Huvane, who we've worked with for years, is that he did not want the cover in costume. And when I went to Anna just to confirm that, I remember her words, Jill, this is the September cover of Vogue. Of course, we're not doing it in costume. It has to be fashion. Okay, great. We're all on the same page here. Awesome. Back to the hair thing. What she would have typically done is let her hair go back to blonde over time, right? So it wouldn't be the 3 processes of bleaching in a row, right? Because any woman that has dyed their hair knows what happens. But we had to shoot when we had to shoot, so we needed her to do that. I remember we were all in the car with Kirsten. She was in the front seat of the town car, and I was in the back, and she goes, oh, do you come and have a brush? And I'm like, yeah. And it's hot. We're in Paris. Hand her my brush. And then next thing I know, hair is coming into my window. And I'm like, into my mouth. And she's like, did my hair just come out? I'm like, no. No, it didn't come out. She's like, I think my hair is coming out. I'm like, no, it's not. So we kind of just kept going with it. And I just remember when we get the images back, the image we had shot for the cover, Anna's one comment was, her hair looks flat. We have to reshoot this image for the cover. And why does it look flat? Because we made her to
dye her hair.
Yeah, dye her hair from red to a bright white, whitish blonde in 2 days.
And then we did reshoot that cover. We went to LA, and then we did
ran the costume cover.
It's so interesting because you go into these shoots with an idea of what's going to happen. And I always think, oh, I could see that or whatever. And then Annie takes these photographs that just blow your mind.
No, I know.
Because that was 5 minutes.
Yeah.
There was this textured wall in one of the locations, and she was dressed as Marie Antoinette with the wig and the costume. And she walked by the wall, and Annie was like, hold on, and had her sit in front of the wall. And that was it.
Right.
I don't even think it was a planned shot.
And then think about the one big cast shot where we had hair and makeup. Stefan Murray did the
Odile
film.
Gilbert, the hairstylist.
She was the hairstylist, did the actual movie too. But getting everyone together, we did have the dressers from the film, but we had a big cast there. And somehow Karen and I had to be the stand-ins. I was Rose Byrne. You were Kirsten.
Right, because I was sitting in the center.
And I feel like we sat there for hours.
Oh, I know. And we couldn't work because
I actually had my phone.
I had my phone too, but we couldn't keep it out because we had to be sitting there and so still. And we were the last ones to be replaced.
Yeah.
So we were there with all the actors and actresses, and we're in like our normal clothes and they're all in costume.
I still have that picture. I mean, Annie's a genius. We all know that. But even to the positioning. Right. Our positioning is even exactly the same.
No, I know.
As when they sat in to
we showed them how we were sitting so that they could mimic it.
It was wild. Yeah. Was there something on that set? I feel like every shoot we do together, there's a blade of grass.
Oh, no, that was when we were at Versailles. we were going to be photographing at the Petit Trianon. And
Is that with the carriage?
yeah,
When we're gonna-
the whole thing was that there's this overgrown, beautiful grasses. And when it was scouted, Annie was like, tell them not to cut the grass. And we were told, oh, we never cut that grass. It's always overgrown. That's how it always is. We never touch it. And I was like, please, no one touch a blade of the grass. There's Versailles, and the Petit Trianon is like this summer cottage at Versailles. And we're driving over to it. And I'm looking out the window and I think, this must be some other area that I don't know about because the grass is cut to an inch of its life. It is like shaved. There's not like a blade of grass in sight. And
like turf.
Yeah, it's turf. And basically what happened was like a couple days prior to us arriving in Paris, some fragrance brand had an event at Versailles and it was outside and they mowed all the lawn of the Petit Trianon. Oh. And then it became like days of us trying to find an area that had tall grass.
Oh, but that happened on the Penelope cruise in Madrid too.
Right, with Pedro.
Where we drove, yes.
Like an hour away to get a blade of grass.
Yes. I always feel bad. Whoever the location guy is always gets screamed at.
There's always something like
There's
that.
There's always something.
Because for every shoot, there is always one thing that goes wrong. There's always some hiccup, some bigger than others. You hope that you get through it and there's not 10 hiccups.
Right. Well, I know with Fantastic Beasts, that was tricky because they're shooting in London, but recreating New York in a different time period. But all the actors are in London. So you guys are going to London, but the sets have been struck. I mean, trying to figure that out, I just know how many calls between how to recreate New York in London,
right,
and all of that, but not being able to bring the actors to New York. We used models for the shoots, so the models are wearing the fashion Eddie's in costume,
right,
and it ended up great. It was our version,
and it was fun.
Yeah.
It was interesting because the more we shot on sets, the more we even got to know the producers to these directors who became our like key people because they were the ones that helped us make it happen.
Yeah.
Because we needed someone on the inside that was going to be on our side and say, okay, this is the schedule for the day. This is what's happening, because we were so beholden to them.
Yeah. This is another thing that can happen. You shoot this cover story to go with what you think is the release date of the film.
Right.
So for me, I'm scheduling everything for 12 months, expecting this Frida Kahlo cover to land July or November. And then we've gone to press and the film has moved, or we find out in enough time to maybe pull a model out of the issue for the cover, but we can't replace 12 pages in the issue. That's what happened with Frida, but I know that was pretty crazy with the monkey
No, that shoot was a nightmare. A nightmare. When we were in Mexico City on set, they were already very late in filming. They should have been editing at that point, and they were still like a month out or something. And obviously, Salma Hayek was playing Frida Kahlo. Even when we were there, they were doing retakes of scenes. It wasn't like they were still filming. I think they were doing reshoots of certain things. But it was Miramax. So it was Harvey Weinstein.
who we had done a lot with.
Right. And Miramax pays for us to go on those shoots. They paid for it because it's not cheap. So we're on set, and Harvey would always send someone, and it was Robin. She was the woman that we worked with all the time on all the Miramax films. And, Frida Kahlo had a pet monkey in real life, which was a cappuccino monkey. So there was the cappuccino, the kind of breed of monkey on set.
And this was the same monkey that was in the film.
Yeah, and it was called Frida. And normally when you're like working with animals, they have a backup animal. There's the wrangler has the key. It's like having a stand-in, like something happens to the monkey, then you need someone else. They had one monkey, and they had animal wranglers that came with the monkey.
Oh God.
At one point, we're about to shoot, and Annie's like, where's Frida? And she's referring to the monkey, and no one can find Frida the monkey. And Frida the monkey is like under a big truck drinking Coca-Cola and eating gummy bears. And I'm not joking. And I thought, this is probably not right. And I don't know how we're going to get Frida out from underneath the truck. And Frida was not very nice, but loved Salma Hayek.
Okay.
Like Salma would say Frida and it would run up and go up on her shoulder. But anyone else, it started hissing. So I was like, okay, so we could find the animal wrangler. We get on set, we do the whole thing. And then Frida is missing again. And all of a sudden I hear yelling and Frida had bitten the woman from Miramax. All of a sudden I keep on hearing people screaming medic. And I'm like, and I'm thinking that they're calling the medic because obviously the set has collapsed, because I would look up in the ceiling of the set and it was like being held together by bubble gun and shoestring. And I thought, this is dangerous. But it was because Robin had been bitten by Cappuccino and then had to go home because it was not a good situation.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But yeah.
Wild. And then I remember one that we actually did afterwards, which is definitely more complicated, is Chicago. Because that was not on set. That is bringing the cast and their wardrobe and their hair and makeup sometimes to Annie's studio.
Right, and the choreographer.
Right. It was now recreating the film. They were filming in Toronto and then trying to get them right after wrap. Like, before they go too far, come straight to New York from Toronto. And that was having a studio that was very supportive of Vogue and these Annie stories and the importance to them to have this cover for the release of their film. And then also having Rob Marshall, who very much loved Annie, loved Vogue, just was thrilled to be able
But that
to
story, do you remember that story? It was so crazy. These shoots happened at a time where there were a lot bigger budgets.
Well, Catherine Zeta-Jones showed up in a limo with a bottle of champagne.
Right. Yeah. There was.
The studio would handle getting.
Yeah, because for
there.
them, that was like them paying for press.
Right.
It wasn't like pay to play. It was more like an organic,
No,
collaborative. Like,
and it's not just the having their star on
and
the
Vogue
cover.
had to pay
this
too.
Is promoting Chicago.
Yeah.
Like,
So it was like everyone kind of pitched in.
Yeah.
So for the film, Catherine Zeta-Jones and Renee Zellweger wore wigs. And the costumer was Colleen Atwood. And then the wig person was also equally famous. And the wigs were in Toronto. And I remember having this conversation about how do we get the wigs from Toronto? Like, are we shipping them? How are we doing this? Are they coming with the costumes? And I get a call from one of the producers on the film and they said, oh, the wigs have to travel with a person in first class. The person has to sit in a seat and then the wig has to be in a special box on a second seat in first class. And I thought, okay. And they said, oh, we'll make all the arrangements.
Yeah, of course.
The person will deliver and it'll be the hair assistant who also will have to be on set anyway.
Right.
So they have to travel that way. And I kept on thinking like, I don't know why it has to be first class. Because I was like, are the wigs really big? I don't understand. So the day has come where the wigs are arriving and the assistants are coming from the airport and they're in the SUV. And this is when our office was on West 26th Street, far west Chelsea. That street was always very windy. And it happened to be an incredibly windy day. We pay all this money to get these freaking wigs from Canada to New York. And they take out all the wigs. And I remember there was a lot of them, and I don't understand why there were so many, but I think they had alternate.
If you think about it now, because we didn't see the film then, if you see how many changes they each have, even with a barrette or
and it was always
a net,
exactly, or a fringe or something.
It's not like they took the wig and clipped it. Yeah. They had a new wig. That was like,
so we were in the studio where we had a big elephant door that you could just like roll up the door, and I was like, maybe the car, because these wigs seem to be very important, should just pull into the studio, and then we just take them out in the studio. And I don't know, something happened. I get distracted. I guess they didn't pull the car in. They leave the car on the street. They open the back of the SUV. They put all the wigs on like a little cart. As soon as they put them on the cart, the wind blows and all of a sudden the boxes are just blowing all over 26th Street. These wigs that we spent like tens of thousands of dollars, they're just rolling in the street and everyone's screaming because there's cars coming. And I was like, one of these wigs is going to be run over. Everyone's like screaming, hysterical. We get all the wigs and we put it in the
Did
studio.
we even use the wigs?
I think in the end we didn't. I don't even remember because like at some point after like everyone's on set and Annie starts shooting, then it all becomes a blur because I'm
Yeah,
like,
I
okay,
know.
we're here, everyone's here.
Because what I remember is the choreographer was there. Annie, of course, even though it's a still image, likes to. I remember this on Hamilton too.
Yeah.
Like each guy on Hamilton, when she was doing them separately, was doing their whole performance from stage. So it is a way to get an action shot in a still image, right? So it's not so posed. So they kept doing their dance sequence. And Catherine's a professional. She was a dancer. And it must have been a long time since they had done that scene because Renee was having a lot of trouble remembering the choreo. And even if they had to stop, Catherine would still finish the whole.
Yeah, she would. Yeah. She would do the whole
And
thing.
so it was awkward to watch because I was just like, oh my God. That was a situation where I think, I can't remember, correct me if I'm wrong, what the cover ended up being. I know it in my head, but it wasn't a costume.
No, they had kind of inspired by, but I can't remember.
Yeah, and we had Richard Gere was amazing when he came in. Queen Latifah was amazing as well. Yeah, those shoots were...
I know, it's fun to do those recreations, but we don't really do that anymore. The actual shoot time is very consolidated now. It's not like these long 12 or 16 weeks where you're shooting and you have like some space where you can have someone come on set. Now people are shooting in 6 weeks, you know. It's,
right, exactly.
And I think honestly, I think there's like also liability now, like for people to walk on set. There's just like things have changed so much. We haven't been on an actual film set in a long time. I'm trying to think like the last one. I can't even remember, quite honestly.
It's probably maybe like a Star Wars or something.
Yeah, and that wasn't even on set. That the last time Annie did Star Wars, or maybe it was a combination between the UK and going to Jordan, because that's where J.J. Abrams used to film. The director, he would film in Jordan, and that's where she went to do the Star Wars. But I felt like it was a Vogue shoot, but maybe I'm not remembering correctly.
Well, as always, Karen, we could keep going forever. So I'm probably going to have you back again.
All right.
Because I just love the trip down memory lane. I think it's super interesting for people to know all that goes into Annie's images. She really is one of the best to ever do what she does.
It's fun to talk about these things. You know, it was like we kind of grew up doing these shoots and being together. It's fun. And it's good while we still remember.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much.
All right.
And I'll see you later.
All right, bye.
Okay, that's our show. Thanks for listening to Going Rogue. And be sure to like and subscribe. Today's show is produced by me and Maddie Rosenberg at Radio Free Rhinecliff with assistance from Maddie Kelly. Special thanks to David Vo for our great graphics and Taras Romanov for our epic theme music. See you next Friday.